Hello everybody. Today me and my colleague Kareem Kiwan will be giving a presentation about Schumpeter. Starting with creative destruction. Movie streaming is a huge example of an industry disrupted through creative destruction. Blockbuster's movie rental service was outdated and replaced by Netflix's superior service, online streaming. Most people see this as a tragedy for Blockbuster, but the economist Joseph Schumpeter would see it as a triumph of capitalism. To understand Schumpeter, we must understand his rejection of equilibrium. He argued that most economists focused on the circular flow, a static, repetitive system where nothing truly changes. But Schumpeter was interested in development. He argued that development happens through new combinations, what we now call innovation. Crucially, he separated the inventor from the entrepreneur. A scientist can invent a light bulb, but the entrepreneur is the one who builds the factories and changes the world's economy. This is not a smooth process, it is a violent disruption of the status quo. In a perfect equilibrium, there is no room for profit or growth. It's just a repetitive loop. He reasoned that capitalism only survives because it mutates from within. He identified the entrepreneur as the specific agent required to break this cycle. Crucially, he argued that this isn't possible through savings alone. It requires bank credit to hijack resources from old industries and give them to the new. For Schumpeter, progress is not a smooth curve. It is a series of violent, revolutionary shifts that he called creative destruction. It is the only way for the system to evolve.
Schumpeter is frequently described as a conservative Marxist, a label that reflects his unique position in economic history. He bridged two distinct schools of thought. He utilized the mathematical position of the Austrian School of Economics, but he combined it with Karl Marx's view of capitalism as a dynamic, often turbulent process. Schumpeter agreed with Marx on a fundamental level. Capitalism is not a static system. It constantly destroys old structures to create new ones. However, they fundamentally disagree on why the system would eventually end. Marx believed capitalism would fail due to its failures, specifically by creating poverty and inequality that would lead to a workers' revolution. Schumpeter believed capitalism would fail due to its success. He argued that as the system became more efficient, it would inevitably become more bureaucratic. He predicted that capitalism would eventually produce a class of administrators and intellectuals who would regulate the economy to the point of stagnation. This evolution in Schumpeter's theory mirrored his own life experiences. In his early career in Vienna, witnessing the decline of the old aristocracy, Schumpeter focused on the heroic entrepreneur. At this stage, he viewed innovation as the work of individual geniuses who disrupted the status quo through sheer force of will. Later, after moving to the United States and observing the rise of massive American corporations, he updated his views. He realized that innovation was shifting from individual inventors to corporate boardrooms. Schumpeter foresaw that the role of a solitary hero would be replaced by research and development departments. He predicted a future where progress would become automated and impersonal, driven by teams and budgets rather than individual visionaries. If we look at the current economic landscape, Joseph Schumpeter arguably explains the mechanics of Silicon Valley better than any contemporary observer. His concept of creative destruction has effectively become the standard operating model for the technology sector. We see this process not as a theoretical concept, but as a constant cycle of industrial mutation. It is a mechanism by which the new does not just compete with the old, but renders it obsolete. This was evident when the smartphone effectively eliminated the consumer camera market, and we are witnessing it again as artificial intelligence challenges the dominance of traditional search engines. Crucially, Schumpeter provides a framework that defends the existence of modern tech monopolies. While traditional economics often views monopolies as inefficient, Schumpeter argued they are a necessary engine for progress. He posited that perfect competition, where margins are razor thin, does not allow for significant innovation. Instead, he argued that companies need the massive temporary profits secured by a monopoly position to fund the exorbitant costs of the next breakthrough. Developing generative AI or launching commercial space travel requires billions of dollars in capex. These are risks that a small business operating in a highly competitive market simply cannot afford to take. The modern tech ecosystem also validates Schumpeter's evolving views on how innovation happens. We currently see a split that mirrors the two phases of his theory. On one hand, we have the return of the singular destructive figure, exemplified by leaders like Elon Musk, who drives change through individual vision and risk taking. On the other hand, giants like Apple and Microsoft treat innovation as a formal, organized process. In these environments, progress is a result of bureaucratic efficiency and massive R&D departments rather than individual genius. Underlining this entire system is the venture capital industry. This sector fulfills Schumpeter's specific view of the financial institution. He did not view the banker as a passive middleman who simply stores value. He saw the creditor as the capitalist par excellence, the gatekeeper who dictates the path of the economy. Today's venture capitalists play this exact role, acting as the selectors who decide which potential futures get funded and which are left to wither. If there is a single defining takeaway from Joseph Schumpeter's work, it is a fundamental shift in how we visualize the economy. For too long, traditional economics has treated the market as a machine, a mechanical system that constantly seeks a state of rest or equilibrium. Schumpeter challenges us to abandon this static model. Instead, we must view the economy as a living, breathing organism. Schumpeter teaches us that capitalism is inherently evolutionary. It does not move in a straight line. It is a biological process that is constantly mutating and adapting to new environments. Within this ecosystem, the entrepreneur acts as a primary driver and innovation serves as the engine. It is not supply and demand that powers the process forward, but rather the introduction of new technologies and methods that force the system to evolve. Perhaps the most critical lesson for the modern observer is how we interpret economic turbulence. In the Schumpeterian view, instability is not a bug in the software, it is a central feature of the system. We are conditioned to view recessions, corporate bankruptcies, and the collapse of legacy industries as signs of failure or mismanagement. Schumpeter argues that they are often the opposite. They are the healthy, albeit painful, evidence that the economy is functioning correctly. This turbulence represents the necessary reallocation of capital. The system must shed its dead skin, which is inefficient companies and obsolete technologies, to release resources for new growth. In this framework, a perfectly stable economy is not a success, it is a sign of stagnation. Equilibrium is effectively death, creative destruction is the pulse of evolving life. Thank you for your attention to this matter.